Hi, the Big Book Project is really pleased to have with us today translator David McKay, and he's here to talk to us about The Remembered Soldier by Anjet Daanje. And this book is just out this month, May 2025. And I'm really excited to talk to you about it, David.
Yeah, I'm excited too, Lori. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah.
So I thought we might start out with just asking about how you came across this author, how you became acquainted with her work, and in particular, The Remembered Soldier.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a long it was a long journey for the book from first being published in the Netherlands to now having an English edition. And as you can see from the copyright dates in the book, it's 6 years. The publication now is 6 years later than in the Netherlands. Um, and Anya Danya had been writing novels for decades and was had this long, but had never had much recognition. And what recognition she had was mostly regional. She was up in the north of the Netherlands, and and her publisher had a mostly kind of a local and a regional audience there. And this was the book that changed that. And at first, it was a reviewer at one of the national newspapers, the NRC Handelsblad, who actually a number of months after the book had first been published, noticed it, read it, and decided, oh, we have to get this book to the public. We have to tell people that they need to read this. So that newspaper published several very enthusiastic articles about it in the course of the year. But it was a while after the first publication, so it actually had to sort of be revived and come back. And then it started to get more critical attention at first after that. And I discovered it at a point when it had quite a bit of critical attention already after that first review, but it was only starting to reach the public by then. But that was already in 2020, the following year, and it wasn't until 2021 that I seriously started looking for ways to promote it and seeing. And I've and it took me a while to realize, like, okay, I had to take the first steps myself. It was a book where I would really have to take the initiative, and a lot of people were scared of the size of the book, the length of the book, in terms of promoting it abroad. It costs a lot to have a book like this translated, is one thing. It costs a lot. The paper costs a lot, to publish it. So it's a real risk, and it takes a really daring publisher to make that choice. Um, so I was really surprised when I finally just said, okay, I'm going to, on my own initiative, just translate a sample, start sending it to publishers I know, see if there's interest. And then almost immediately, there were responses to it. And it actually ended up being independent publishers who were publishing it, partly because the larger publishers just move more slowly. So that, New Vessel is a smaller organization, and he could read this, he could decide, I love this, and just immediately get in touch with the Dutch publisher about the rights. And that's what happened. And the Dutch publisher, being a small regional publisher, felt a great deal of sympathy with a small independent in the States like New Vessel. Yeah.
Yeah, New Vessel publishes great books, and I feel fortunate because they kind of brought the book to my attention. I think maybe back in February, and said, "Hey, this book would be great for the Big Book Project. It's just it fits with your mission exactly." And I got a galley, and I fell in love with it immediately. So maybe we'll talk about the book, what's happening in the book. The Remembered Soldier, from the title, is a Belgian soldier. His name is, well, when we're introduced to him, his name is Noon Merkham, and he was injured in World War One. He ends up in an asylum in Ghent, and the doctors there and the staff start issuing kind of like classified ads. Does anyone know this man? And I gather that was kind of a, a common phenomenon that occurred in World War One. Do you have any kind of historical background about that, or did you do any research about like how many soldiers ended up in this kind of condition from Flanders, or
I don't
how?
I don't know how many it was. It is a real asylum, and you can visit that asylum. It's a museum of outsider art now, and there's a little bit of
Oh,
information there about the history of the institution too. But you can actually still get a sense of what it was like to be there, and as a patient in the asylum to and wander around the courtyard there, and so it was nice to be able to go to Ghent and do that while I was translating the book and actually have a picture in my head of this is where he's walking around. Um, and I don't know how common the phenomenon was, but it's certainly a real phenomenon, and it's certainly and it's not and it's more than just one or two isolated cases. There were a lot of there really were a lot of soldiers who or there were a number of soldiers at least who didn't have any memory of who they were, and there was this practice of putting out advertisements in newspapers, sometimes with written descriptions of what these soldiers looked like. So you can imagine, without even a photo, of course, there were a lot of people responding to these advertisements, or with a grainy black and white photo. In some cases, maybe, I don't know, but even then, yeah.
and our soldier in the book, he's named Noon Merkham because he was found injured and unconscious at noon, the time of day, and then near the town of Merkham. Am I pronouncing that right? Merkham?
Yes, Merkham, yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then, so after they place the ad, there are several women that come by and want to see him, and they walk away disappointed. And that kind of crushes him a little bit because he can see, how hopeful they are that, oh, maybe I finally found my disappeared loved one. Maybe he's not dead. And then finally, a woman named Julianne comes to the asylum and says, yes, you are my husband. You are my husband, um, Amand Kopens. And uh, tell us what happens kind of from there.
Um, and so fairly rapidly after that, I mean, she's able to convince the doctors there. That's the first thing, that she really is his wife. She says a couple of things about marks on his body that aren't immediately visible, um, and she takes him home almost. I believe it's the next day in the book. So it moves very fast, and all of a sudden he's going home with this woman who says she's his wife, and he has no idea. Um, and he doesn't remember things like what it's like to be on a train, and it's probably a little different to be on a train than it was before the war anyway. Or everything is new and exciting and fascinating and frightening to him. It's just the basic facts of being out in the world, of not being in this sheltered place anymore. Um, and then she takes him home, and very quickly there's an expectation that he'll start playing his usual role in the household again. And what she does is runs a photography business. And she explains to him, "Oh, it was your photography business. You showed me how to do it before you left." Um, and so he's expected to just sort of start doing that again. She also has a shop, and so she has a small shop, and then in the back is the photography studio. And he's also sleeping in the photography studio. And in fact, on one of the walls, there's a huge scene of a battlefield. So he's sleeping in this room that has a huge battlefield scene in it, and that's where he's expected to spend most of his time. And in some ways, she's quite shy with him in terms of talking to him and having any kind of personal conversation with him at first. So he's sort of left to his own devices a lot of the time too, and he's sleeping in that room alone at night. So it's a very awkward situation for him, and he's not sure whether he wants to go back to the asylum or stay there. He's not sure whether she wants him there or she wants him to go back to the asylum. So there are all these questions about what's going on here. Will he be able to fit in?
Yeah, it is really awkward. And one of the initially, and one of the fabulous things about, I think, your translation is that awkwardness really comes through. I mean, he doesn't know her. She might as well be a complete stranger to him. And in fact, for his purposes, she is, because he's got no memory of her. no memory of their eldest child, Gus, who I guess he would have seen as a baby before the war. Um, and uh, he I he wants it to work out. You get that sense, um, but it's quite uncomfortable. I think that that one of the things that makes the novel so compelling is how psychological it is,
Mm.
because as as Amand and Julianne start to become used to each other, and they actually kind of fall in love or fall back in love with each other. Um, he's assaulted by these nightmares that he gets of the battlefield, and uh, and he tries to kind of put those in the back of his head and not really dwell on them, but they kind of keep resurfacing. And then he also has a lot of paranoia and suspicions that start to bubble up. And I don't want to give too much of the book away, but can you kind of talk about how in this kind of close third person narration you were able to capture these kind of these shifts, and it almost sometimes it almost seems schizophrenic, where he'll be like, oh, we're having such a great time, I love her so much, I can't live without her. And then it's like he's thinking, oh, she's lying to me, I don't believe her, some of this isn't true. So how did you approach that?
Yeah, and it's interesting, and in a way, it's a more, and this all hangs together with the style of the book, right? And the way the sentences are put together, because the sentences are very long. Each paragraph is usually just one or two sentences, and each most of the sentences start with and, so every moment is flowing into the next moment, and there's almost this sense of brings a sense of constant change in the book. Whatever thought has been going on in his mind, or whatever has been happening, there's constantly something that gives the lie to that, or challenges that, or makes him wonder if what he just thought is true. Um, and so in a way, the style, the way Anjet has written it, really supports that. And maybe it's interesting to know that the style was even more radical at first. That she wrote the whole book without chapters, without paragraphs, without sentence breaks. So she wrote it all as sentences connected with commas. And that was the whole. And then she gave it to her publisher in that form in Dutch, and said, can I do anything with this? And he said, oh yes, we could do a lot with this, but I'm going to break it up into paragraphs and chapters. And I talked to her about it when I was translating it. I said, do you want it to be more radical than this in English? Do you want to go back to your original vision? And she said no, that this is what she had figured out with her publisher, and this is what she thought worked best in the end. And so we kept it
Wow.
that way. Yeah.
I guess I don't know of many books that read like that. I mean, Lucy Ellmann's Ducks Newburyport is the first one that comes to mind, where it's just like there's no white spaces. It's just like continual text, and I mean, people say it's a 1,000 page uh, sentence. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not much. So I think that you selected a passage from the maybe the end of the seventh chapter of the book that kind of will
Yes.
give us a sense of the style a little bit.
Yeah, and it gives you a sense also of the kind of situation he's in, the paranoia you were talking about, and this going back and forth between different perspectives. Um, and his thoughts will not settle. They dance around in the same suffocating circle. He said goodbye to her at Gus at the platform. He remembers that. And he was looking forward to the war. Going to the front was an adventure for him. And he even felt guilty toward her for feeling that way. And now she tells him he was so scared that he wanted to flee to the Netherlands with her. It's not that there are too many questions, it just seems that way because he can't see the big picture. All these questions probably have just one answer, and he has the feeling the answer's so simple he actually already knows it, like a word on the tip of your tongue that just won't come to mind. He lies beside her, and his fear colonizes the darkness around him, hiding under the bed, scaling the pitched roof, rustling among the garments on the line, shivering under the blankets, and he reaches for her hand and whispers, "Are you sleeping?" And she answers at once. Her voice is as clear and resolute as if she swept away all petty cares. She puts her arm around him and lays her head on his chest and tells him about the day he taught her to ride a bicycle, about the taste of wild strawberries, and how they laughed at the farmer who thought she was a man. And he thinks she knows it too. Their life is built on quicksand. One false step and they'll drown together.
Yeah, that really does give you a sense of kind of this precarity that they're living in, and it becomes very volatile at times. They fight and they argue, and uh, they walk out on each other, leave the house, and I think there's a real sense that this fragile relationship that they've kind of established, this second life, so to speak, um, could shatter at any point. And some of that, I think, is based around the suspicion, at least the suspicion I felt, as is Julianne really telling him the truth? Is her story of their life together real? I mean, she claims that she was his parents' maid, and to the horror of his mother, they fell in love and they had an affair, and he wouldn't ask her to marry him, and so eventually she asked him to get married, and they did. And then, eventually World War I happened and he got sent off to war. But um throughout, I think, the book, you're just wondering, is this all a ruse? Is she just faking this? Is she making this all up out of whole cloth? And how did you kind of balance that kind of factuality, or that seeming reality that she's conveying and wants to convince him of, and yet this kind of maybe it doesn't quite sound totally right?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, it becomes so. Another thing about the sentences in the book is that they're almost all connected by and, or they're simply strung together with commas or something. So there isn't a lot of because, in spite of, in the light of. There's not a and part of what's going on is that he's not able to fully able to connect things in this way, that he's not able to have a picture of cause and effect that would kind of stabilize his world, in which one thing leading to another, this is the reason for this led to that. It's all one thing after another, and all the connections between things are kind of up in the air, partly because he doesn't know what to believe. And as time goes on, it only gets more complicated in some ways. There are more things, maybe this story is true, but that one isn't. This part of what I'm being told is right, but I don't know about this. And I think as a translator, you certainly need to, in a way, you need to put aside what you know about the whole story in order to get his mood. So the most important thing is in each clause, and it often shifts many times within one of these long sentences. In each clause, there's a sense of what is his mood now, what is his perspective on life, and to translate that from that perspective, but knowing it's going to shift at the next minute. And then at the same time, there are little clues in the book. But I kind of had to do that in two stages. So at first, there's translating the truth of the book from moment to moment, and then at the end, you go back and you see, okay, okay, there's a structure to the whole book. There are clues at certain points to, especially in his dreams, for example. He gets hints about what's going on about his past, and I had to put some of those clues in, make sure my translation was consistent with the big picture as well. Yeah.
I think one of the things that made me so suspicious of Julianne was she seems to have this almost obsessive need to recreate something that's happened, or to make a idealized version of it. I mean, they'll, for instance, in the present day of the book, go for a lovely bicycle ride, and they'll have a great time, and they'll be very affectionate and very loving. And later that night, they'll be lying in bed, and she'll say, "So tell me about what we did today." And he'll start, telling the story, and she'll be like, she'll correct him, and
Yeah.
like, no, this is the way it happened, or let's say it happened that way. And that really kind of like heightened um my doubts about, well, is she has she just been concocting these stories about their past together from the very beginning?
Yeah, yeah, and then at the same time, there's a sense in the book. There are good reasons to think that maybe she's doing it because it's this wonderful opportunity for her, that she had this husband who was in a rut with for years. Their marriage wasn't really satisfying for either of them anymore, and now he's back, and finally there's a blank slate, and there's a chance to rewrite everything and start afresh, and she wants to make sure they do it right. So there's certainly there are certainly all kinds of reasons to suspect her, but there are also many reasons as it goes on not to suspect her. And what becomes, I think, clear in the course of the book anyway is her devotion to him. That
Yeah.
yeah, whatever else she is or isn't, she's devoted to him. Yeah.
So memory is obviously a major theme of the book, and I thought it was really artfully done the way that Amon's memory is, and Julianne's and her version of events is kind of uh, mirrored or in some way, or reflected in this business that they have, where it's a photography studio, and a lot of the photography that they do is for war widows to come in and get their picture taken, in this scene that's been painted of a war scene, and Amon will put on his old soldier's uniform and pose with them as though he were, their spouse. Um, so maybe you can talk a little bit about how that memory device kind of works to enhance or highlight the psychological kind of tension that's happening in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, there's a lot of back and forth between them too about what exactly the photography business is going to be and do too, and what kinds of photos. And she wants him to be more and more involved in it, and she wants him to. She sort of cajoles and coaxes and pushes him into posing with these widows as a soldier, even though he's very uncomfortable with that. It's something that brings back memories for him that disturbs his sleep at night. Um, they um, they do a new painting together to replace the old one that was in the studio for use as a backdrop, a new battlefield scene, because he has a lot to tell her about what battlefields actually look like, and that seems somewhat therapeutic for him as they're doing it. It's this chance for him to do something with some of these memories he has and some of the strange dreams that he doesn't understand. Um, and there's an amazing chapter where they end up going to Ypres together, to on a battlefield tour, an early battlefield tour. And the reason they sign up for this tour is so that they can get to these battlefields and take photographs there of him, posing as a soldier on the battlefield. And they want to make postcards that they'll sell in the shop with that. But it becomes this amazing exploration of, even after World War One, how there was this how quickly the war became a tourist attraction, and how quickly the memory of it was cleaned up for tourists, and there were these sites that were cleaned up that you could visit, and now you're seeing what the war is like, but they were ignoring all of the rubble and all of the people living in shanties, on the way to these sites on the bus. So yeah.
Another thing that I noted while I was reading this book is how claustrophobic it feels. There are some other characters in the book, like Gus and Rosie, the two kids, Felice, the neighbor. Um, but for the most part, and maybe, like 80% of the book perhaps, is just this couple, and they're just trying to figure each other out, work through things. Um, and that, I thought, really set a tone and the mood for the novel as well. Did you have any trouble working with that kind of aspect of it?
um, there's I mean, she really works with repetition and monotony in the book, and there's this sense of, in a way, that the same things keep coming back. Sometimes that's comforting for him. Sometimes it makes him feel trapped. But every morning he's, taking out the coal scuttle again and getting coal to bring in to light the fire, and they have the same routine of chores that they go through every day, and the children come home from school at the same time. Um, and that happens again. I mean, it's astonishing how many times these things happen in the course of the novel, it and so as a translator, you have to track what's changing here, and in the language as well, what words are coming up over and over again. And what's new? When is something that has already happened 10 times suddenly being described in a new way because he's changed or his perspective is different in that moment. Um, so that's part of the challenge of that, is figuring out when does repetition really need to literally be the same words the same way, and when does it need to, when is and to look carefully and see when is it actually something new, even though it's the same event that's happened before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really fascinating. Um, Before we move on to maybe some of your current work, or maybe whether you're going to be um, translating any more of Anjet Daanje, I'm wondering, is there any other aspect of the novel that we didn't discuss that you think we missed that's important? I'm trying not to kind of spoil outcomes of the novel, kind of talking around some things, but
Yeah, exactly. I'm reluctant to to give away too much too. I no, I think we've what the other thing that was exciting for me as a translator is that it's so well researched, and the world she creates is a real world. It's historical, but at the same time it's so detailed and vivid. um, I visited Kortrijk as well, where most of the book is set, where they have their life together. But Annette never visited it because she wanted her image of it to be entirely the image of the historical city. She wanted to be entirely based on these old photos and maps that she found. And she really has a whole, or at least at that time, she says she forgets quickly, but she had this whole world in her head, and she knew things like, if he's going from point A to point B, this bridge is closed, so he's going to have to, that month, so going to have to go a different way, and this is the level of detail at which he constructed that world. I am working on another novel by her. I'm finishing up my translation of the novel she wrote after this one. um, and that's a much more imaginative, fanciful novel. But when I asked her questions about this one, she was always able really to look up what the answer was. I said, okay, what is this business at the church where they keep turning around the chairs they're in, and why are they doing that? And she could show me a photo of what those chairs looked like and what they were, and say, here's what they're doing with them. She knew what model of machine gun it was she was talking about, what model of camera, at any point in the novel, and so I could really look up the instructions for that model and find out exactly what every part of it was called. So that was a really
Wow.
interesting piece of it too.
It,
Yeah.
it sounds like you had a really good collaboration while you were doing the translation.
Yeah, yeah, it was great to work with Anya, and she was very helpful and very happy to talk about the book too. It was really, yeah, interesting to almost no one has her email, so once you get it, she's quite talkative. She
Well, well, I read a little bit about this. I think this novel that you're currently translating it's the one that she says is kind of inspired by Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Is that correct?
yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
and it's got like 11 different point of views in it.
Yes, yeah. So
Yeah,
the compared to, I mean, in a way, it's interesting that the Remembered Soldier is such a big book because it has such a narrow scope, as you were saying. You know, it's about these two people and their life together, and in some ways it feels very small, and often he feels trapped in this small world. And it's such a big book because it's so fine grained in a way, because each moment is explored so thoroughly, and sometimes there's even it's so continuous that, you know, for the over the course of several weeks, each time, you know, she doesn't skip anything. So he fell asleep, and then he had this dream, and then this happened, and then he woke up, and then the next day, and then he fell asleep, and then more dreams, and waking up in the middle of the night and talking to her, and falling asleep again, and waking up, and the next day. So it's so fine grained that it needs all that space for all that detail. Yeah.
yeah.
And
I couldn't. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
yeah, no,
interrupt,
no, go
but
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I couldn't help but being reminded a bit of Henry James while I was
Yeah.
when I was reading this book. I don't know about you, but just the way that it's just so very nuanced, and you just have this kind of um, stream of consciousness where you're really inside the character's head as things are shifting in their brain, and they're getting different impressions, and that's affecting, you know, kind of how they think at that very minute. But then the next minute there'll be another shift, and there'll be a kind of a different perspective.
Yeah, yeah. There's even an aspect of the turn of the screw in it, a novel like that, where you're trapped inside the head of this unreliable narrator, and and you never get out. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. Well, I'm
yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So I think you were about to tell us about how different the
yeah,
new novel
yes.
is.
So the new novel, which is called The Song of Stork and Dromedary, which is a reference to two different animals who come up in a kind of almost as fables that are told in the course of the book. There are fables about these two animals that touch on the themes of the book. Um, the it's a big book, and it's also extremely wide ranging over the course of, you know, more than 200 years, and I think four different countries, and a lot of it is in one village, which is the village in which the equivalent of the Bronte family lives, but they're never at the center of the story. It's always people seeing them from a distance or thinking about them. So it's never about their lives. It's about how other people see their lives and understand their lives. And very soon you move past, and it moves very quickly from one generation to the next. So very very soon, they're all dead and gone, and it's about their literary legacy, and that connection becomes more and more tenuous as the book goes on, and more thematic, and more musical in a way. There are a lot of sort of leitmotifs, you know, that keep coming up over and over again in the different chapters.
So we've referred a number of times to the size of the book. The Remembered Soldier is, I think, in my English translation, like 562 pages.
Yeah.
Is the new novel, you know, a,
It's
a,
almost
a
exactly
chunk
the
like
same
this?
length. Yeah, as a translator, I
Okay.
think in words, and they're both almost exactly 280,000 words long. So,
Oh, that must be her
yeah.
sweet spot.
Yeah, yeah, I guess so.
Um, and in terms of like word count, I'm just curious. Do does Dutch and English, do they kind of Somewhere I heard I think a French translator say that there's always like many more words in a French book in a word count than in the English translation of it. Is that the case with Dutch English?
In Dutch, many words are written together. They're written as compound words, or compound words that would be written as two or three words in English are all merged together as one word. So if you do a word count in Microsoft Word, then it's usually a slightly smaller number of words in Dutch, but it's usually a smaller number of letters in English. So English is slightly more
Okay.
compact in how you express yourself. And yeah, yeah.
Well, so that's going to be how far are you in that project of translating it?
Yeah, I've so I mean, pub, the publishers have already seen a draft of it, and it will be published not by New Vessel, but it'll be published by Scribe again in the UK. And I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to say the American publisher's name yet because that's pretty new.
Okay.
So, but there'll be a different American publisher, um, and um, it's in a pretty advanced stage. So I'm doing my last very slow read through of it, looking for uh, it's still the style somewhat, but a lot of it is about the kinds of like consistency issues, the voice, and there are a lot of cross references in the book. So just making sure that all of the literary allusions and all of the cross references from chapter to chapter that those are coming through in the translation. Yeah.
Oh, that's another big project, but I'm so excited. I can't wait to get my hands on that one.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
fantastic book too, and that's the book that really swept all the prizes there are to win in the Dutch-speaking world. So that's what put her sort of on top of the ladder. Now, not that I think she cares very much about that. She's still living in the same place in Groningen and very far from the Amsterdam literary scene that she was before. Yeah.
well, you don't only translate 500 plus page books because I know that one of my favorite books that you've translated that I hand sell at my bookstore all the time is War and Turpentine by Stefan Hertmans.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic book. Again, World War One.
Yes, yes, and I actually worried about that a little. I thought that's a pretty small niche to get pigeonholed into if this book is successful. But yeah, I'm glad that I've come across two such wonderful books about the First World War and its legacy. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You're the World War One guy.
yeah, yeah. I am now. Yeah.
Any other projects kind of further on the horizon that you're looking forward to?
um. No, right now I'm just concentrating on getting this second huge book finished, and I'll be happy when I emerge blinking into the light after these two huge Anjet Daanje novels. I'm sure there'll be something else. I translate a lot of theater too, so I've been translating plays recently, enjoying that. Those are nice short projects. And poetry, and enjoying taking breaks by translating these little things in between.
That's
And
great.
another thing that's the UK edition of Astrid Roemer's book Off White is coming out next week
Oh,
as well, and it's already out in the United States. And her first novel to come out in English, On a Woman's Madness, was a huge critical success and was shortlisted for a couple of prizes, a couple of major prizes.
yeah.
Um,
I'm familiar with that book because one prize that I work with is called the Inside Literary Prize. I don't know if you've heard of this one, but that book on a Woman's Madness was shortlisted for that. That's a literary prize that's judged 100% by incarcerated individuals around the
yeah,
United States. So we're
fantastic.
really
Yeah.
excited to have that one on the short list.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to hear that the book speaks to them. Yeah, and I should add that one's not my translation. So I worked with the translator of that book, Lucy Scott, but she's the sole translator of that. And then we co-translated the next one, which is Off White.
Okay. All right. Well, David, it was such a joy to talk to you about this book. I was complaining to you before we got on the video that a number of my colleagues, booksellers at the bookstore, are in the process of reading the book, but I really want to talk to them more
Yeah.
about some of the latter parts of the book. But I'm going to have to wait a little while for that because it's not a quick read, but it sure is worth it to take your
Yeah.
time and just savor it. It's so wonderful.
And it's a good book for book clubs too. I think it's the kind of book you really want to discuss with someone else who's finished it once you've finished it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 All right, David. Thank you so much for joining us on the Big Book Project.
Thank you, Laurie. It was great to have the opportunity to talk to you. Yeah.